Yeah, so episode 404 with Ms. Clare Lopez. And so the woman that put Claire and I in touch, Alice Butler Short, passed away 2 days ago. And it's a huge bummer. I was blessed to know Alice for about 2 months. I only knew her for 2 months. And it was it made me think of that Buddhist quote. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When the student is truly ready, the teacher will disappear. And it seems odd that someone came into my life that was so impactful for just 8 weeks and then gone that I can't help think that there was a purpose behind it.
Alice was a wonderful friend to me, from Ireland, but a real American patriot. She knew the meaning of American exceptionalism. She embraced it, and led groups, patriotic groups, in our area, which is the D.C. capital area, which is how I came to know her. But just the loveliest lady you ever want to meet, lively and just full of life. And it's a terrible loss that she's now gone and not with us anymore.
Yeah. It's so weird because she and I always texted, and I remember her saying, she was like, I was in the hospital. She's like, I'm out now. She's like, it still kind of hurts, but she's like, I'm just resting now. And I was like, okay, glad to hear it. And then she kind of she didn't respond, which isn't like her. And I found out things had gotten worse. And I was like, oh, well, I was like, she'll get better. And then it just didn't get better. And it was very weird because it was our last texts were she's like, I'm out. She's like, I'm going to be up and ready to go in a couple more days. And she's like, I'm getting ready for 2024. And I was like, awesome. And then it just kind of, I don't know. It's very odd. It's very weird. I don't know. It's definitely kind of...
Yeah, I can't say I know exactly, what took her down, but from what I understand, she fought hard to live. She loved life, but whatever it was too strong, and she succumbed.
Yeah, it's well, if anyone can. She deserves to rest. Alice lived a good life. The little I knew her, she lived a good life. Again, for everybody listening, I'm dog sitting for a friend, so obviously don't have the studio mic and camera, and so apologize for that. Because we're only doing a half hour, we won't jump into any of the big topics we hit on last week. But I did want to ask you, what do you think about right now? It's kind of moving from conspiracy theory to it might become reality, COVID passports. What are your thoughts on that, Claire?
I think it is entirely unconstitutional. It's un-American. I think that there is already gathering very strong pushback to even the concept of doing such a thing across the United States among citizen patriots. And I can't imagine that this will be allowed to go forward.
Yeah, because Governor DeSantis he's issuing an executive order to not follow it. And with Florida and Texas, isn't it weird though how both they're not seeing spikes in cases?
They followed their governors, Governor Greg Abbott in Texas and Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, followed very different paths than other states did. And while many other states were still locked down and masks everywhere, and they opened up and they said, business needs to be open. Kids need to be in school. And what happened? Their cases went down. Now, there are a lot of questions about how you count cases, of course, too. And, whether the commonly used test is even valid. Or whether a whole bunch of the supposedly positive tests are actually false positives. I think you probably know, and maybe listeners do too, how they do these tests. They get a sample, right? Mm-hmm. And because the virus tends to be so minuscule in the sample, they spin it up in the laboratory and they augment it.
Mm-hmm. PCR.
And augment it. And take it up through cycle after cycle after cycle until they get enough virus to say, oh, look, there's virus. It's a positive test. By which point it's completely meaningless.
Yeah.
Because the virus wasn't even sufficient enough to cause a positive test at the lower levels of these cycles. So, the counting is just completely bogus. And then, of course, we've got the Centers for Disease Control, if they've got even a shred of credibility left, which perhaps not, but on their own website months ago, they at the end of last year, they had already admitted on their website that barely 6% of the total numbers earlier counted as cases of this CCP virus, only 6% of the mortality, of the deaths, actually were attributable to the virus and only the virus. Mm-hmm. Not a heart attack, not morbid obesity, not a stroke, not a motorcycle accident, not an infected hangnail, but just the virus. 6%. So the true numbers of those that actually succumbed to the virus and only the virus, the CDC on its website says it's 6% of the total numbers. So who knows what to believe anymore, but certainly not the CDC.
Yeah, it's getting weird. Tomorrow I'm having on a former FBI guy who I've had on here before, and he's going to talk about COVID fraud. And then after that, I'm having on Dr. Hodkinson, a Cambridge doctor who has been scrubbed from the internet. Every time he has a video, he's a very esteemed, CV is insane, talking about COVID. And he's saying, he's like, COVID's real, it's a thing, people get sick and they die. And he was like, there's two ways to go about this. You do a 14-day lockdown at gunpoint, or you do nothing. Because he was like, there is no middle ground. You can't do it with a virus. It will do this. We can keep doing this partial lockdown for centuries. Nothing will happen. And obviously, because we can't do it.
I mean, there is a middle ground. And that middle ground are the many prophylactics and therapeutics that have been developed over this past year. They include cheap, effective, and proven safe drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, budesonide, treatments like monoclonal antibody treatments, and of course, vaccines. Well, if they actually were truly vaccines and not genetic experimental treatments, but there are things in the middle. You don't have to either lock down, which has never been done before, by the way, and it obviously doesn't work, or nothing. There's plenty you can do in the middle, but for reasons that can be discussed, a lot of those other remedies have been suppressed.
Yeah, the whole thing is, it's just, to use kindergarten vernacular, it's stinky. There's something doesn't, and I say this as a biology major, someone that's gotten to medical school and pharmacy school and published research. It's on PubMed, it's on the National Institutes of Health. I've done obviously I'm not a physician, and I'm not going to try to even make a remote claim that I am, but I have some understanding. It seems very odd that, the vaccine, well, one, this isn't Ebola. This isn't something with a 99% lethality rate, right?
Well, 50% for Ebola, but okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, not a nuclear weapon, right? Okay, even
30, 40, 50.
Yeah. We'll say 50. We'll say 40, whatever. Let's say 25% lethality. This isn't that, right? It's 99.98, 97% survival rate. Furthermore, so it's not even that this thing is just like a heartless, biblical killer on one hand. And on the other hand, the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting it, and it doesn't prevent you from transmitting it. So the only analogy
apparently it doesn't prevent you from reinfecting with the virus either.
Yeah. So let's just point out, because everything I just said, that's not a conspiracy. That statistic is from the CDC, the survival rate. And the vaccine, the four, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and whatever the other ones are, Johnson & Johnson.
And Pfizer.
Pfizer. So none of this is a conspiracy. These are all facts. It doesn't prevent you from getting it. It doesn't prevent you from transmitting it. So the only analogy I can think of in my head is COVID is let's just call it a contagious headache. We'll just use that. So let's say it's a contagious headache. You get a migraine, whatever. This doesn't stop you from getting the headache, and it doesn't stop you from transmitting the headache. So really what it is Tylenol. But it's not even Tylenol, because Tylenol is tried and true and proven. This is a brand new painkiller for a contagious headache that, sure, kills some people, but 99.8% of people don't die. So when you add up all those things, it's not a biblical plague. It doesn't prevent you from getting it, and it doesn't prevent you from transmitting it. Yet it's being pushed on everyone, coordinated across all global media. Man, at the risk of, strapping on my tinfoil hat, something doesn't add up. Is this just a money grab, or is this just never let a crisis go to waste? Is this just power?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, right? So in the beginning and even now, I think there is not a full good understanding of what this virus actually is. Part of that is a failure to honestly investigate its origins. WHO has been remiss. That's putting it kindly. Owned and operated by the Chinese Communist Party would be a more honest way of putting that. Mm-hmm. So lack of good knowledge about what this is and where it's going, what its actual genetic sequence truly is, how that has been, will be mutating. There's a lack of good knowledge about those things. Number two, you mentioned don't ever let a good crisis go to waste. And obviously, this crisis here in the United States and elsewhere around the world, too, has been used as a power grab by petty tyrants at the local level, city, town, state level, to grab power, to control people's lives in a micro managerial way, very Marxist, obviously, and then. The final thing is probably the money and the humongous amounts of money that are to be made from these vaccines. And well, what if it does mutate some more? Well, we're going to need another vaccine or 2 or 3 or 4. You can just hear the cash register clinking every time it's mentioned. Yeah. So it's all of the above.
Yeah, it seems like it's a 21st century take on the military-industrial complex, right? Well, as the threat moves, we're going to need new weapon systems, right? We're going to need to meet the Soviets in Afghanistan and Vietnam, and in space, and in the ocean. Like, it's just, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It seems like that's what's going on. The one thing that worries me more than anything is just the shifting of the Overton window and the shifting of what is acceptable. 14 days to flatten that will never happen. They're not going to shut down the country. Are you kidding me? We might need another month. You can't go to church. You can't do this. You got to get a vaccine. You get going on and on and on. My concern is this is going to keep slipping and slipping and slipping. And then it's going to be with vaccine passports. You can't do X, Y, and Z. And there's only so many businesses left because COVID's destroyed everything. That very soon it's going to be, well, your passport isn't up to date. You didn't get the newest vaccine. And then it's going to slip from COVID to another variant, And it's going to be years down the road, and we're going to be daisy chaining from one thing to the next. It's going to be a long game of telephone to where no one's even going to remember where it began. And next thing you know, we're going to be socially conditioned that you got to get your yearly shots from the government. And who the hell knows?
I'm happy to say that in state after state now, we are seeing governors and legislatures of principle, as well as citizen patriots, beginning to react. Mm-hmm. We can look at a state we've mentioned, like Florida, where a very common sense, strong principled leader in Governor DeSantis is actually leading that state in bucking all of that Marxist tyranny that's slipping down over us. Mm-hmm. Other states are doing the same thing. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And that is the answer at the local level. Mm-hmm. The answers are not going to come out of Capitol Hill inside the Beltway. Despite some very good people up there, there are a number of very good people. There is a number of very good people up there. But the answer to all of this is really going to be at the state level and below, counties, districts, cities. That is where the reassertion of our constitutional republic is already now beginning to take shape.
Mm-hmm. And do you think we're going to see a further sort of deviation where we're going to have California and Texas kind of slipping further and further into these weird communist techno dystopias? And are we going to have Texas and Florida flourishing? Are we going to, is this just going to be the biggest red pill ever?
Well, let's see what happens in California. Of course, they've got the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom going on, Governor Newsom going on. And they've got enough verified signatures now to put this on the ballot this year. He very well could be recalled. You'll have seen, that former ambassador to Germany and then later the acting director of national intelligence, Rick Grenell, has sort of been teasing about whether he will he, won't he run for governor to take Newsom's place. Maybe there's hope for California yet. But in the meantime, Texas has got a whole bunch more issues that it's got to deal with, and Governor Abbott. And that, of course, has to do with the invasion of the border coming up from the south over the border, with the complete collapse of the federal level of the United States Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, not the men and women of those agencies, I mean to say, but the orders given to them to stand down and let the invasion happen. So Texas has got to deal with that more than any other state, probably Arizona too. But the biggest numbers, I think, are coming across in Texas. So a lot of crises going on here at the same time, aren't there?
Mm-hmm. Do you think what's going, and it's, again, another, not just to kind of beat another drum, but I mean, right, you can't go in a Food Lion without, like a burqa wrapped over your face. But then when it comes to the border, we just turn off COVID part of reality. We just say that doesn't exist anymore. We come on in, everyone come on in. But if I go into Walmart without a mask on, I'm killing everybody's grandma. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But you can see now what the hierarchy of objectives are, right? Mm-hmm. Or what the hierarchy of objectives is. And that means that for the Democrat Party, the ones, in control right now of our federal agencies, the number one top priority for them is get into the country a flood of more of what they hope will be one day future Democrat Party voters. Mm-hmm. And virus and health concerns regarding the virus definitely have slipped to at least second place, if not further down the list. It's far more important to them now in this window as they see it, this small window before the backlash really kicks in. Certainly with elections, midterm elections next year in 2022. But in this window, I think the Democrat Party leadership, Marxist communists that they are, sees an opportunity, that won't be with them for very long, that they've got to accomplish as much as they possibly can, ramming things through Congress, opening the border, flooding the country. And the virus, well, they'll worry about that later. But for right now, it's get these people in, get them in by the thousands, by the millions as fast as we can, because in their hope anyway, they may later be fast-tracked to a citizenship status, and boy, maybe they can even vote next year, Yeah, it kind of seems like, it almost seems like the Kalergi plan coming to life. Right, and of course you can't criticize it because it's going to be twisted as, why are you anti-immigrant? This country was built on immigrants. I've Two of my best friends are from Kosovo and Bulgaria. It took 7 years to get their green cards, and
they waited in line, didn't they? And they did it legally, didn't they?
And they are die-hard patriots. They love this country more than because they remember war. They remember war. One guy, my friend Prince from Kosovo, his dad had both his arms and legs broken during the Serbian War for being a journalist. And, you know, he comes here and he's, America, what is great about this is you don't have this. And it's like, so when I see that, I'm sorry, I know the dog's barking. When I see that, that's what makes me so upset, because that's who you're stealing it from.
The people who waited in line and did it right. Yes, you're absolutely right. And I can understand how upset they are. But here's something interesting. When you look at other first-generation Americans, and in particular among the Hispanic population, those of them who came in legally waited their turn, like you said, sometimes waiting for years to get their papers, processed and through the entire procedure, and then proudly to raise their hand and become citizens. They, maybe more than anybody else, resent the line jumpers, the ones who are being allowed in now to cut the line. Mm-hmm. And so I am not completely sure, how the sentiment may go among even those populations the Democrats might be counting on for support. When you actually talk to some of these people, again, first generation American immigrants who did it legally, they don't want any part of the line jumping that's going on. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, this country was not built on immigrants. It was founded by settlers and pioneers. Immigrants came later, and those who came legally contributed mightily to this country. Yeah. But it's not right to say that the country was built on immigrants, legal or illegal. It was built on the pioneers and the settlers and the founding fathers. Mm-hmm. That's what laid down the basis for this country. Yeah. Many things came afterward, including lots of legal immigration. Yeah. But it's got to be legal, and that's the difference. If we are to be a constitutional republic of law and order, then those laws have to be enforced. Mm-hmm. And one of the absolute first characteristics of a nation state is borders that are enforced. Yeah. You don't have a border. You don't have a country. You don't have a country otherwise. Just like you don't have a home or a neighborhood. Yeah. And that's just kind of another thing you can hide behind, because you can't criticize it. The second you start, well, how come they're bringing in millions of illegal? You racist Nazi, you just don't. And it's like, dude, well, I mean, what the hell? So, I don't know. It seems like it's all spiraling downwards, but I also try not to focus on that. I try to think that there's, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and there's going to be some positive that comes out of this. And maybe it's, what better example than to see what happens when you let these policies go unchecked versus what happens when you have a Texas or a Florida stand up and go against it. I think that there can be benefits to come from this. Maybe I'm just idyllic. I know I am. No, I think you're making a very good point. And that is part of the pushback that I'm seeing. The organization at the local level, in terms of working with school boards, working with local politicians, working on legislation to either propose new and better legislation or reform existing legislation at the state legislative level. Mm-hmm. This is going on in states all over the country. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right to look, in a positive way on some of this pushback. It'll take a while. It's going to take a lot of effort. But we're going to do it. Yeah, we're going to save the republic. Yes, we are. Goddamn right. I know. I'm doe-eyed positive. I'm like, everything's fine, and I need you to sometimes bring me back down. So we got 5 more minutes. And again, for everybody listening, I am dog sitting. I'm sorry for the dogs barking, and I feel like shit, so I'm not on my A game. So, one thing I really would like, and I wasn't just saying this to be nice, I would legitimately like to hear your, perhaps next week, your thesis on Siberia,
on the resources in Siberia.
Well, when I wrote my master's thesis, I was at the Maxwell School of Syracuse University, and my thesis advisor, was a Russia-focused specialist professor. But in particular, the focus was about, you might say, geographic matters. And so my thesis is actually about the economic potential, the natural resources of Siberia. That's what it was about.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be an awesome episode. It's just because that's something I don't know anything about. And, I've explained this to people before. Tommy, what is your podcast about? I mean, truly at the base form is I like finding people who are passionate about anything. And I like talking to that. I like talking to those people and hearing those things, whatever it's about, because there's something that you can't fake or fabricate or synthesize. You can't get that anywhere else. And I think that's interesting. And it's because that's something that I never really, or at least as I'm getting older, I'm looking at it more and more. Early on, it's all just, money and borders, and there's good and there's bad in the end. And everyone who's in jail is purely evil, and everyone who's a leader is purely angelic, and that's it. And as I get older, that model, deteriorates more and more. And as I look further and further, I think it was the comedian Tim Dillon. He was like, it's probably the most unsexy thing is like you become president and you go in there and you talk to all the generals and you're in the bunker and you realize that everything is really just based around like conserving trade lines. And it's like not much more, making sure you got nukes pointed at the enemy and make sure you got an open path to all the timber and the minerals and the oils. But that's one thing that I'm kind of getting more interested in the older I get. Is like, or again, like Elon Musk said on Joe Rogan, he was like, the lockdowns can't go forever. You can't just legislate money and say it's all going to be good. I think the meme is, he says, if no one's making any stuff, there is no stuff. Like, it's very easy to get, you get lost and you just go to the store. There's bananas at the store. That's what it is, right? I order a hoodie. It comes in the mail. The end. I plug in the laptop works. Here's Claire at the end. You don't have to think about any, but we do live in a physical reality. We are on a spherical rock. There are things that we use to this computer out of rare earth metals and all the fabrications and the lights and the electricity and this. It's real, and everything we do is based off physical things. And it's what used to be boring to me is that's kind of becoming like sexier and sexier is the realization that like it's not like the 1700s where like keeping big patches of like forest was part of national security because we used the trees for ships of the line for like the Queen's Navy or our Navy. And it seems so removed because now it's all, we have aircraft carriers, but it's like it all still comes out of the ground. And I know what I'm saying just sounds moronic, but maybe it's just the realization that like it really is, the world is like a big video game and there are resources that different countries are on and we're plotting to get them. So in conclusion, that's why I would like to hear your Siberian thesis.
We can talk about it more next week. And indeed, in the years since I wrote that, geopolitical realities in that region of the Far East have changed. And so all of that can now, feed into our discussion. Yeah, maybe next week. Okay.
And again, Claire, I'm sorry I'm not at my A game. I feel like...
I wish you a speedy recovery. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you so much. Next week, we'll get back into it with a full-length episode. I've got complaints from people about last week being a short episode. I know I'm going to get complaints this week because more and more people, believe it or not, they tune in for Clare Lopez, not for me. So we're going to get back to full-length episodes next week because I am a vessel for them to reach you. I don't think I'm important. I think they can discard me.
I thank you for the platform, for the platform that lets us both reach all of your audience. So take care of yourself, and we'll talk again next week.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. God bless and rest in peace, Alice. We love you. I know you're in
Alice,
heaven.
yeah.
And God bless America. And gonna make you proud, Alice. All right, Claire.
All right. Take care.
You too. Thank you very much.